me. Go. Yeah.
This is Yostin Mosquera, who brutally killed two innocent and put their body parts into a suitcase. The way he killed them is unimaginable, and we are going to discuss it in this video.
Picture this. It's a summer evening in London, July 2023, and the iconic Clifton Suspension Bridge glows under the soft haze of city light. Tourists stroll across its towering structure, marveling at its beauty, unaware that something sinister has just been left behind, something that will haunt detectives and jurors for the rest of their lives. Beneath the serenity of that historic landmark, police are summoned to investigate two abandoned suitcases, items that appear unremarkable at first glance, but radiate an aura of dread to those standing nearby. When the officers unzip them, their worst fears are confirmed. Inside are human remains, meticulously packed, severed from their owners, stripped of dignity, and stuffed into luggage like discarded objects. The crime scene sends ripples of horror through both Avon and Somerset Police and the Metropolitan Police as they scramble to identify the victims and track the perpetrator. Within hours, investigators piece together the grim puzzle. The victims are 62-year-old Albert Alfonso and his longtime friend and former partner, 71-year-old Paul Longworth. Both men were known in their social circles as eccentric but kind-hearted, and they had been brutally murdered in Albert's flat. What no one knows yet is that the killings were not only savage, but filmed, captured in excruciating detail by multiple cameras, a decision that would expose an entire courtroom to one of the most harrowing pieces of evidence imaginable. The man responsible, 35-year-old Yostin Mosquera, is no stranger to the darker corners of life. He met Albert Alfonso through a shadowy online subculture of extreme fetish videos, graphic content involving domination, humiliation, and violence, staged for voyeuristic consumption. For Albert, these videos were an escape, a private obsession he shared with few. For Mosquera, they were both a lure and an opportunity. Wita and the two men agreed to meet in Albert's apartment that July. It was under the pretense of filming one such scene, a consensual arrangement that had become part of Albert's life. But what happened next transcended fantasy and turned into a nightmare. According to prosecutors, Mosquera entered Albert's home with a chilling plan already in motion. He brought with him a concealed knife and would later arm himself with a hammer, two instruments that would leave behind scenes of carnage, so shocking that experienced detectives recoiled. What began as an evening of fetish play spiraled into violence that no one present could have predicted, least of all Albert himself. In the dimly lit bedroom, Albert donned a white swimming cap and a black leather eye mask, preparing himself for the scene, unaware that his obscured vision made him the perfect target. Mosquera had hidden the knife under a cloth on a nearby table, within easy reach. 4 cameras had been carefully positioned to capture every moment of what Albert believed was consensual role play. Instead, they became silent witnesses to a cold-blooded killing. In haunting footage later shown in court, the scene shifts abruptly from staged intimacy to real violence. The cameras captured Mosquera's sudden attack, the glint of the knife as he lunged at Albert, and the chaos that followed. Prosecutors would later play the footage twice for the jury, first without sound, then with audio, forcing them to endure not only the horrific visuals, but also the chilling soundtrack. Albert's final breaths, Mosquera's unsettling question, "Do you like it?" as if mocking his victim's agony. The room fell silent in court as the footage rolled, jurors pale and trembling as they watched an act of cruelty few could comprehend. One male juror physically recoiled in his seat, while a female juror wrapped her scarf tightly around her mouth, as though trying to shield herself from the horror unfolding on screen. The graphic imagery was so disturbing that a juror from the first trial, which had collapsed due to technical issues with evidence timing, had begged to be discharged after seeing it, claiming they could not bear to watch it again. That juror was excused, leaving 11 members to carry the burden of judgment. For officers tasked with investigating the case, the footage was equally traumatizing. Hardened detectives from both Avon and Somerset Police and the Metropolitan Police confessed that they had never seen anything like it. One officer reportedly turned white as a sheet after viewing the murder, and others described it as the single most horrific act they had encountered in their careers. But while Albert's murder was captured on film, Paul Longworth's killing took place in grim silence. Prosecutors revealed that Paul had been killed hours earlier, bludgeoned to death with a hammer, and his body concealed in the base of a divan bed in the adjacent room. His friendship with Albert spanned decades. The two had once been lovers but remained close companions, a bond that Mosquera shattered with unimaginable brutality. The killer's narrative, however, was very different. In a desperate bid to save himself, Mosquera claimed that Albert had been the one to kill Paul, and that he, in turn, attacked Albert out of fear for his own life. But no one who knew Albert could reconcile this story with the gentle, if eccentric man they had loved. Albert's interest in extreme sexual practices was well known among his small circle, but he was not seen as dangerous, and certainly not capable of murdering his closest friend. Prosecutors dismantled Mosquera's claims in meticulous detail, portraying him as a manipulative predator who used Albert's vulnerabilities and fetish lifestyle against him. What emerged in court was a picture of a man who had calculated every move, from positioning the cameras to conceal his true intentions, to cleaning up the apartment and disposing of the bodies. After murdering both men, Mosquera dismembered their remains, placing them into suitcases and discarding them near the Clifton Suspension Bridge. This act of cold efficiency shocked even seasoned investigators, a stark contrast to the intimacy of the crimes themselves. The footage, which prosecutors admitted had been blurred to minimize trauma, remained the most damning piece of evidence, proving beyond any doubt that Mosquera was in full control of his actions, calm and deliberate as he extinguished Albert's life. For the jurors, this trial was unlike anything they could have prepared for. Unlike officers or journalists, who choose their professions and receive training to handle disturbing content, jurors are everyday people chosen at random. They had not asked to become witnesses to one of the most grotesque crimes in recent British history, and yet they bore that burden for weeks as they listened to testimony, examined evidence, and relived the killings frame by frame. Courtrooms are often places of calm procedure, but during this trial, silence itself became oppressive. Even seasoned reporters covering the proceedings admitted to struggling with the emotional toll. BBC journalists covering the case later described watching the footage as one of the most traumatic experiences of their careers, and one chose not to watch it at all during the retrial, instead focusing on the jurors' reactions. When the verdict finally arrived, finding Mosquera guilty of both murders, the tension in the courtroom broke. Justice had been served, but no one left that room unscarred. Justin Mosquera's trial was more than a legal proceeding. It was a descent into darkness, a case that revealed the depths of depravity lurking beneath a facade of sexual exploration and trust. For Albert Alfonso and Paul Longworth, what should have been a night of familiarity and companionship became their last. Albert, a man in his 60s who had lived much of his life on the fringes of societal norms, was known for his love of leather, masks, and fetish roleplay, a world of underground videos and consensual acts that, while taboo to many, was his sanctuary. His apartment reflected this dual life, a modest London flat transformed into a stage, its walls lined with cameras, its bedroom prepared for elaborate scenarios. It was a private world he shared with select partners, a place where he felt free to explore without judgment. But Mosquera weaponized that trust, using Albert's openness as a blueprint for murder. What makes this case so haunting is not only the brutality of the acts themselves, but their intimacy. Murder is always an act of ultimate violation, but here it was laced with betrayal. Albert was blindfolded, masked, and vulnerable, believing himself safe in a dynamic he had likely rehearsed countless times. He couldn't see the knife Mosquera had hidden under a cloth, nor predict the sudden shift from play to deadly reality. The sound of Mosquera's voice asking, "Do you like it?" as Albert's life ebbed away, is a chilling testament to the sadistic nature of the crime, a deliberate twisting of trust into terror. For Paul, whose murder occurred earlier that night, the violence was equally horrific. He was bludgeoned to death with a hammer, his body concealed while Mosquera staged the murder of Albert. Prosecutors painted Mosquera as a man driven by control and perversion, someone who meticulously planned not just the killings, but their aftermath. The dismemberment of both victims' bodies, the packing of their remains into suitcases, and their transportation to the iconic Clifton Suspension Bridge were acts of calculated cruelty. The symbolism of discarding human life like trash at such a landmark only amplified the horror, turning one of Britain's most picturesque sights into a scene of unspeakable evil. Detectives pieced together Mosquera's movements through CCTV footage, phone records, and forensic evidence, building a timeline that demolished his claims of self-defense. But the true centerpiece of the case remained the footage. In court, this video became both the prosecution's strongest weapon and the jurors' greatest torment. The judge, Mr. Justice Benethan, acknowledged the trauma of what they were asked to endure, praising their courage and resilience. He reminded them that while reading about violent crime is harrowing, seeing it unfold in real time is something few can ever truly recover from. The government now offers counseling for jurors who witness such evidence. But no therapy can erase the images etched into their memories. For many, this trial raised uncomfortable questions about the limits of justice. Should jurors, ordinary citizens, be forced to watch acts of real violence in such detail? And yet, without that evidence, the truth might never have been fully known. The footage revealed Mosquera's calm demeanor, his deliberate actions, and his dominance over the scene. It stripped away any pretense of fear or panic, proving he was not a man defending himself, but a predator carrying out an execution. The trial also shone a light on the dark underworld of fetish content, a subculture often misunderstood and stigmatized. Albert's involvement in this scene became a focal point for the defense, but prosecutors argued that it had nothing to do with the core crime. Murder is murder, regardless of the context. Albert and Paul's lifestyle choices did not justify or invite their deaths, and portraying them as dangerous or deviant was a smokescreen. Their humanity mattered, and it was this humanity that Mosquera had stripped from them so violently. Journalists covering the trial spoke openly about the emotional burden of reporting on this case. For them, too, the images were inescapable. One reporter chose not to watch the footage, instead focusing on the reactions of the second jury. She described their visible distress, a man flinching away, a woman pulling her scarf over her mouth as if to shield herself. These reactions spoke volumes about the impact of what they were seeing, a rare glimpse of raw humanity in a courtroom setting that is often sterile and formal. The verdict, delivered after just over 5 hours of deliberation, was unanimous, guilty of both murders. Mosquera showed little emotion as the sentence was read. But for the families of Albert and Paul, justice was bittersweet. No verdict could undo the trauma of their loved ones' deaths or erase the gruesome details that had been laid bare for the world to see. The Clifton Suspension Bridge, once a symbol of Victorian engineering brilliance, now carried the weight of their memory. Mosquera's name joins a grim list of killers whose crimes are defined not just by their violence, but by their theatricality and cruelty. In the annals of British true crime, this case will be remembered for its brutality, its disturbing intimacy, and the indelible mark it left on those who investigated, prosecuted, and judged it. It serves as a chilling reminder that evil often hides behind masks of normalcy, that danger can lurk in relationships built on trust and vulnerability. It also highlights the unseen emotional toll on jurors and investigators, ordinary people thrust into extraordinary darkness, tasked with bearing witness so justice can prevail. For Albert and Paul, two men who shared love, friendship, and a private world of exploration, their story was hijacked by violence. But they should not be remembered solely as victims of a sensational crime. They were individuals with rich histories, passions, and relationships whose lives deserved respect. Mosquera took their lives and their dignity, but he could not erase the truth that eventually caught up to him. His conviction ensures he will spend the rest of his life behind bars, a fitting end for a man who inflicted such profound horror. Yet, even with justice served, the shadow of this case lingers. For those who sat in that courtroom, the haunting images of Albert's final moments will never fade. A stark lesson in the depths of cruelty humans are capable of, and a reminder of the courage it takes to face that darkness head on.